Hello and welcome to more Dark Souls 2 with me, Oni Black Mage. We are currently in the depths of Drangleic Castle, in front of the King's Gate, and now moving forward to explore a lot ahead. This area certainly feels like it's large enough and treacherous enough to be a final area, so I'm kind of feeling the limits of my Mage Knight build. Like I keep saying, I'm inching ever and ever closer towards feeling like I want to respec myself to being a pure mage and wear the mage-oriented gear. However, the mage-oriented gear makes me look like a woman, so if I'm going to do that change, I might as well just go out and do the full change. But before all that happens, let's get as much mileage as we can out of Mr. Oni Black Mage here. Seems like more of these soul-sucking giant statues, so the trick is to basically kill little enemies right next to these statues and have the soul be absorbed by the large giant statue instead of you. That's what animates them. You see how it flies towards it? Yep, that's how it turns on. These guys are tricky and they guard very well. They're like miniature ruin sentinels. And they're just as pesky. And 4-on-1 is difficult for me. 5-on-1 is even further difficult for me, because I'm having a hard time finding a window to get a spell off in time. I'm trying to corral them for Soul Vortex though. But they're fast and they strike so hard. And now there are 6 of them. Now there are 7 of them. This is not looking well. I didn't think that would end well. Alright, I have to kite these guys. There's no way I can run in the middle of that room. I figured it'd be a trap, but I didn't think it'd be that bad. The only thing that'd make it worse is if there was a mini-boss in the middle of all that. This seems like a good time to talk about something as we're treading through this castle. I wanted to talk about the fact that this is a sequel, and a lot of you are thinking, well duh, I know that. No, hear me out. This is a sequel in so much that this game is basically trying to be like the first one, and by the first one I mean Demon Souls, not Dark Souls. Like the second one, Dark Souls, and yeah I know, Dark Souls is made by a different company and technically is a lot different. It's basically the same game. The changes are so minor, really. It's mostly gameplay design changes. I like a lot of the gameplay design changes in here. There were a lot of fears early on when this game was first coming out that it was going to be too streamlined and too easy and, you know, casualized or whatever. And that word is almost like a curse word, it seems, in many of the most faithful community. The faithful absolutely hate hearing the word casualized. It makes them feel, I guess, like their elite status is revoked. Whatever elite status that may be, or that they're going to enjoy this game less, or that it's going to be less in quality and challenge than its previous installment. Actually, what I find that Dark Souls 2 is that if you're a first-time newcomer to the genre, it's actually a very, how should I put this, accommodating entry. You don't have to play the first one, you don't have to play the second one, although you would get the references. Oh my gosh, really? A Ruin Sentinel? Oh boy. Do all these doors have Ruin Sentinels behind them? Oh boy. Okay, well I need to light that other giant. There's a Ruin Sentinel there. Probably one behind these doors too. This room suddenly became a lot more treacherous. 3 Ruin Sentinels were hard enough. 6 Ruin Sentinels plus a dozen mini little sentinels, that's a death trap for me. We're gonna have to take this slow and tactical. I'll try to lure people out and kite them towards the bonfire. They won't come close to the bonfire, but they're so good with guarding too, and their reach is so long. And these guys are just as durable as when I fought them before. Jeez, they're smart too. Why wouldn't they be? And of course they have area attacks that can hit through the wall. Just like I was saying, challenge. As I was just saying, this room is challenging. It's still challenging. Although I would completely understand if the sequel wanted to take it in a different direction now that it gained mainstream attention. The second one, the first Dark Souls, the second game in this sort of semi-trilogy, although it's really more of a spiritual sequel, I understand that, really brought attention to the game. to the franchise. Brought it a lot of popularity, brought it a lot of acclaim. It was on many top lists, RPG of the Year lists, and that's fantastic, frankly. That really just accentuates how well it was and how well received it was, especially for being of a so-called niche genre. Be that as it may, the sequel had an opportunity to do quite a few interesting things. Any sequel does, really. Ooh, Ferris's Lockstone. See, there's gotta be good treasure behind these doors, especially if they have... Yep, another Ruin Sentinel. Great. Alright, well, let me get these guys over here. Might as well just try to unlock these doors and figure out what these giants are guarding. But, let's see, where was I? Yeah, sorry, sequels. There's something of a sequel gambit phenomenon. And that's when you come across a sequel, you kind of have there are two major trends that the sequel tends to go to. Option number one is, we're going to try to make a sequel that delivers everything the first one did, however, provides more. Either things are bigger, things are better, it's like the first except more polished, all those options. And that's fine, and in many ways, people expect that. Option number two is this... Oh, actually I didn't expect the floor to fall into like that. At least that makes us one-on-one. Let's see. Option number two is you're going to take this opportunity and do something completely different. Because it's a sequel, and many people may want more of the same of the first one, but you can choose to take the opportunity to try something completely different. You have that creative license now. It's like an option that many games used to explore before reboots and rehashes started becoming a thing. There are many games that do each one successfully and each one unsuccessfully. There are many examples of both of them, but both of them are critical decisions that will really affect your fan base. And frankly, I don't find that there is a perfect balance. You kind of have to lean heavily more towards one or the other. You can try to play middle ground and have a game that's very, very similar to the first one, but tries and explores a lot of differences. But at that point, it becomes an incredibly thin line on how many differences make it to where it's like the first one, but modified, or it's a completely different installment. It basically plays like an entirely different game. Like, it could have been called something different, and it would have been a different game. That's a very thin line. And why does all that matter? Well, frankly, it comes down to the fans and the buying expectations. You see, many people, when they expect one thing and get another, more often than not, that's usually received negatively. Oh, a second bonfire. That's awesome. That's awesome. And you may think, well, if the second game was good, then you think they will receive it, and that's not necessarily true. And this becomes more convoluted when there's a third game, and the third game almost invariably does the same thing. Either it's going to try to emulate one of the two games that came before it, in which case that kind of now establishes a franchise, and of said franchise, two of them, or rather one of them, is not like the other two, which somehow singles that one out. And depending on how well received that singular one was, that could be the black sheep, or it can be the strongest installment and the other two were just weak. What the heck were they thinking? And I'm sure we can all think of trilogies that have done something like that. Let's see, what's a popular example recently of a trilogy that did that? How about Mass Effect? The first Mass Effect, all three Mass Effects, in my opinion, were great games. Fantastic, one of the best new RPG, especially action RPG, installment and new IPs in the last gaming generation. Fantastic. I highly recommend that trilogy. I don't care what people thought about how the game ended, whatever. Those were bad expectations. I already cited that in my opinion article. It's still a great trilogy and one of the best. The thing is, if you play the first game, which is very heavy in terms of its relation towards Knights of the Old Republic, which is what BioWare was coming out of when they made Mass Effect. They pretty much made another independent version of Knights of the Old Republic. It plays more like that than, like, say, a streamlined action RPG. Mass Effect 2, which in my opinion is the best of this trilogy, and Mass Effect 3 which in my opinion streamline the mechanics the tightest, play very similarly and differentiate themselves radically from the first installment. So with that sequel gambit, 1 chose to do something, 2 chose to go in a very different direction, completely different direction, and 3 chose to build off what 2 was establishing, not necessarily go back to 1. And that's what that trilogy came out to be. And there are many trilogies that turn out the other way around. For example, let's take the first 3 Legend of Zelda games. The first one, open world, hack and slash. The second one of the earliest examples of an action RPG. Completely different than the first one. Then the third game, Link to the Past, chose to play like the very first game. And all 3 of those games were fantastic. I highly recommend them as well. It's just that then people now call that second game the Black Sheep, when it really wasn't. It just chose to go to a different design. It's still pretty Zelda-ish, when you think about it. And we can go into that. That's a completely different discussion, what makes a game Zelda-ish. But, what makes a game utilize Zeldanomics, as I call them. And you know a game when it has Zeldanomics. It's like, this game is like Zelda. It has Zelda-like design choices. And I'm proud to call it that, personally. But yeah, you know what I'm talking about with sequel gambits. When a game is just 2, like Dragon Age just now, the first game plays one way, the second game plays like a completely different game. And you're kind of like, ooh, what's this third one going to play like? And the third one looks like it's going to take itself in a completely different direction. An open world, slightly online, multiplayer? Actually, no, I haven't heard multiplayer. I would love for there to be multiplayer. Hey, actually, here's $1 million game idea. I guarantee you would sell millions of units. Here's all you have to say. This is free marketing advice right here. All you have to say, if you have an incredibly good game that's like Dragon Age, here's all you have to do, and make it true. You could put this on the poster, I guarantee you the game will become a bestseller, arguable game of the year. Very simple. Here's what it is. Write it down if you want to. Our game is just like Dragon Age Origins, except bigger, better, and it has multiplayer. Done. That's it. You would immediately, everybody would be like, what? Like Dragon Age Origins, except bigger, better, more, and actual multiplayer? Guarantee that game would sell millions. And why not? Dragon Age Origins was a fantastic game. It's just that when the Dragon Age 2 came out, one of the things we were asking for is, holy crap, co-op would be fantastic. PvP would be a nice addition, but oh my god, co-op would be fantastic. Instead of picking the NPC allies, if I could just pick my hero from another realm. Oh my gosh, that would be fantastic. There are already so few co-op RPGs out there, which is really counterintuitive because out of most game genres, the one that you expect to be working with other people the most is an RPG, more than anything else. And yet, that game has so few co-op games. There's so few co-op RPGs. There really are. And it makes almost no sense. It's like, that's funny. This is a game in which people are controlling, like, teams of other people. You'd think you'd be able to substitute one of those said people with a friend, or at the very least, have a friend control one of your other people. I thought Dragon's Dogma, which again, fantastic game. I highly recommend that game. If you haven't played it, excellent new IP for this new generation. Sorry, I almost had a sneeze there. Excuse me. Alright. You're like about to sneeze, and you just hiccup it out, and it goes away. It's one of those times. Sorry. Anyway. Where was I? Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma is something very clever. They didn't enable strict co-op. However, what they did was, you can create a character that basically is just as strong and just as viable and can kind of be programmed to be just as smart as a player character. And you could share said player character, your pawn as it was called in the game, with anybody else in the entire world over online. And that's awesome. It's basically like importing your buddy like right there as a thing. It was like the next best thing. It was like, you can't get me, however you can get kind of like my vassal, my sidekick, my avatar, if you will. And that was awesome! Fantastic! And a good compromise, I felt. Personally, I would like to have the best of both worlds. I would love to have a pawn system return in addition to having your friend. So that way you could have you, your pawn, and then your friend and their pawn. How awesome would that be? Or at the very least, just maybe have two friends. Your party of three, you know, exploring this giant world, tackling these monsters together. Maybe have a few online challenge maps or challenge monsters that come out. Special ones that really require human versus an AI. I mean, oh my gosh, that's just like a recipe for success. You're wondering, like, why don't they do this? I'm pretty sure these ideas were on the design floor. They just figured, you know, between the project we already have underway and what this would require, it's just too ambitious. We don't have the resources for it, which is a crying shame. And again, returning it back to our sequel talk, that's something that you kind of want to see in the sequel. A lot of the popular changes and suggestions that you made for the first game. For example, when we asked for multiplayer in Mass Effect, we never got it, per se. But what we did get was on the third one, this multiplayer mode. And at first, it was like, oh man, a lot of people, multiplayer inclusion at first, the announcement, there was a lot of backlash. There was a lot of whining. There was a lot of whining over Mass Effect 3's entire development cycle. Like, those people got so much more grief than it deserved, which is wrong, because that game was excellent. It just, a lot of people had incredibly lofty expectations, and that in itself was treacherous. Granted, BioWare did feed some of those expectations, so they're partly to blame, frankly. But no, fan expectations is one of those times where I felt the game developers were in the right and the fans were not in the right when it came to fan outrage over content and quality. Because the game was excellent quality through and through. And at all choices, if you pay attention to the entire Mass Effect franchise, and by the way, unless you've been living under a rock, one of the big hullabaloos that the thing was at the end didn't deliver the open-ended choice, the open-ended culmination of choices over the entire franchise like people thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be like, you know, like any game where there's multiple different distinct endings, and they didn't attempt that. What they were just different shades of the same choice. The same outcome, just slightly different shades. Literally, they basically recolored it. But if you've been paying attention to the entire franchise, or if you've been replaying any Mass Effect game, then you know, and you pick this up on your second or third playthrough, that there never was fully distinct choices. There were always scenarios with subtle differences that referenced your choice, so you had the illusion that you were making choices and differences when you actually never were. There never ever was complete freedom of choice. There was the illusion of the freedom of choice, and it was masterfully crafted through the strong writing of the series. The strong writing of the series literally fooled a massive majority of fans into thinking they were getting completely customized playing experiences. And that never was the case. It was a very elaborate magic trick. However, the trick was revealed in the very end, and people were, or at least some people, I wasn't, a lot of people weren't, but the vocal internet angry crowd that everybody has, every community has, they were the type that got upset and signed petitions and had rallies and held up signs, you know. Useless and ultimately meaningless. But that's the sequel gambit. You're playing with expectations. That's exactly what it is. Sequels equal expectations. Actually, I take that back. There's a third trend that a lot of games try to do, which is unfortunately common. Or maybe it's not common. Well, I don't know. That can go either way. You'll know when I say it. It's the sequel that is essentially a carbon copy of the predecessor. And you know exactly the type of games I'm talking about, where you swear you're playing last year's model, and there are such shallow improvements made. Maybe an extra weapon is changed. Maybe the graphics look slightly tweaked. You know, maybe there's a few more options here. Maybe they did fix a bug in the first game. But you know the games I'm talking about, where the sequel is essentially a carbon copy of the first. And granted, And again, this is still valid. If it sells, then that just kind of proves that that is exactly what people were expecting and wanting. They didn't necessarily want something new. They didn't necessarily want drastic changes. They just wanted exactly last year's model, just slightly updated graphics of this year's model. And I think we're all thinking of modern military shooters. You know, the three big franchises out there that do that. But there are other action games and RPGs that do the same thing. Not perhaps as popularly, but it's still there. It's still there. I think Fable 2 and 3 is probably the most criminal one, where you're playing this, you're like, okay, this is basically 2, except I'm playing with slightly different environments, you know, recycled skins, and I swear this is just nothing but extended DLC. Oh my gosh. This game is basically identical, and for some people are like, yeah, I'm so glad they didn't change anything, everything was perfect. How nice to live in such a closed-minded world, where everything is just so simple and don't really have to think too much about any of that. I'm one of those that, given the preference, I'm okay with any of them. I would like to understand the developer's choices beforehand, and that's something that I'll read. When I'm following a game, I don't read reviews before I read the game, but I do like reading developer commentary. I like reading developer commentary because I like to understand the mindset they went into when they were making this game. Did they want to make this game like Option A, where it's like the sequel, except bigger and better? Or like the prequel, except bigger and better? Are they going with Option B, where we're going to take this series in a completely different direction and allow ourselves some creative freedom and independence? And this is a completely non-sequential sequel? Like, you know, like the Final Fantasy franchise? Or is it going to be like number 3, where we're basically making a carbon copy of the first one because if it ain't broke, why fix it? Let's just polish it up a little bit better and repackage exactly what the people want of the last one. You know? Which option are they going for and why did they do it? That way I at least set my expectations properly. And if they say, you know what, our first one did so well, we just want to honestly keep doing that, or hey, you know what, since this did so much better than expectations, we want to now create a sequel that's like it, except bigger and better and add more features that we weren't able to do in the first one. Or, again, hey, you know what, we made a sequel, and it is, this universe, we only meant that to be a standalone story. We want to make something that's maybe in the same universe, or with several common themes, but it's a completely different game. Don't judge it based on the first one. I want to understand that, so then when I play the game, I'm entering the right mindset. A lot of the disappointment people come with games, especially, and I hate reading the reviews of that later. Like I said, I'm very critical of that. When I play the game and I'm done with it, they're like, oh, that's good, I like what they do with that. I understand where the designer was going. And then some opinionated guy goes off and rattles off his opinion, and his rationale, his disappointment, stems from misplaced preconceptions. And then in those misplaced preconceptions, he finds disappointment because he painted a picture in his mind that was completely erroneous, completely based on his whims and wishes. Didn't listen to what was actually going on, wasn't paying attention. You know, that's funny. You care enough to complain about after the fact, but you don't complain enough to pay attention beforehand. I digress. That suspiciously large painting, by the way, kind of leads me to believe that something crazy is going to happen when I step to it, like a ghost is going to come out, or like that lady will step out of the painting and attack me. Did I not say that we'd be climbing these towers and spires? We totally are, by the way. That's what I love. You see that over there? We're going to go there. That's cool. I like that open air element. These guys are so effective with their blocking. These Golden Knights. But yeah, that's the sequel gambit. That is 100% the sequel gambit. None of the choices are more correct than the other. Each one of the choices have something valuable that they can add to the table, and something that they can enrich the experience of the franchise and increase its fan base with. And in relation to Dark Souls 2, this one seemed to be a little bit more of, I want to say, option number 1 that I was referencing. The one where it's like the last one, except bigger and better. They chose to have a lot of different streamlined designs, sure, because I can see that they meant to make this more appealing and more approachable by newcomers. They wanted to use this game, Dark Souls 2, to appeal to a wider audience. That, I believe, is why they have it launched cross-console. You know, there's been a huge advertising campaign for it, and a lot of the mechanics that they chose, like the Estus Flask, the way they designed it this game, it's a mix between the first game and the second one. So in this one, it's a lot more accommodating. Yeah, you'll get punished for bad calls and bad movements and clumsy playing, but it's also, if you survive, a lot easier to recover from said bad calls. So you're allowed to keep going, get a little bit more mileage and things like that. And I think that's pretty good. Creating that hub zone too of Majula instead of using the bonfires for everything, I thought that was okay too. Like I said, a lot of the changes are noticeable, are significant, do change the way we approach the game, but for the most part, it's just a bigger, better version of the previous game. And knowing that, I'm coming in with that expectation, and I find myself agreeing with it, because that's the preconception I have. Hey, you know what? I see where they took a lot of things, and I see where they changed, and I understand said changes, and that allows me to craft my comprehension of this game and see how much I like it. You know, I'm chewing on it. I can now actually visibly see what they kept and what they changed and what they chose not to keep. And there we go. We move on. We're not agonizing over every design that they have. This is not good. I suddenly found the acid pit. I would love it if they melted too, but my armor is melting right now. Great. Great. I need to get out of here before I die. And I definitely have to make a side trip to Majula after this to repair all my stuff. Did you see what just disappeared? Yeah, I swear. Yeah, he just disappeared. You saw that. He literally just, as soon as I walked past there, he drew in and out of existence. That was literally like basically the draw distance from a spawn point. Right there. How about that? Oh, Havoc Engine, you're so old. I saw some stuff over here I didn't notice before, so if I'm going to break stuff and get it repaired, I might as well just run in and do the whole thing. Let's see if it's worth it. That was not worth it. I've not even used a corrosive urn this entire game. Look at all my broken gear. I don't have the repair spell on me either. I mean, I have a repair spell, but not equipped. Actually, let's keep going until the next, because I don't want to go back to Majula and then have to refight this. It's already been a while since the last bonfire. By the way, roll through that poison arrow room. I noticed you'll get hit a lot less than trying to just shield your way through. I'm gonna play it very careful with all my broken gear. And yeah, I figured I'd be taking a lot more damage. And just play it easy, play it cautious, and get to the next bonfire. It's been a while, there's gotta be a bonfire somewhere around here. Either a door, or there's gotta be a hidden door somewhere around here. There are too many suspicious looking walls and paintings for there not to be a hidden area. I really don't want to get back into this poison dart room. There we go. Fortunately, these guys are pretty vulnerable to magic, it's just that they guard so well and so frequently. This really looks like it would be an excellent, Okay, I figured that painting was suspicious. Dark Spirit ahead, great. Great. Just what I needed, a Dark Spirit. I'm curious, what kind of sequels did you expect to see? What kind of sequels do you actually prefer? Some of my favorite games, in terms of like top 5, top 10 games of all time, are actually sequels. Mostly because I enjoy the design choices they made in them. Capitalizing on something I liked and improving it vastly. So between those three choices, and again, those choices are like the first one but bigger and better, carbon copy the first one, or no, it's like the first one, bigger and better, nothing like the first one, going in an innovative new direction, or carbon copy the first one, A, B, or C. Which one do you guys like the most? I'm very curious, actually. So feel free to discuss. I'd love to hear you guys' opinion. You heard mine, so let's share. Let's swap ideas. I'm fascinated. Alright, Nameless Usurper. I heard a rumor from a friend that if you look closely, the Nameless Usurper is actually the cleric lady that you help, and if you walk next to her in Majula, you do get a sign, and I saw this before, you do get this this warning saying your cracked right eye, you know, trembles, and if you use it, you can attack her. She is the Nameless Usurper, which is interesting to me. And apparently if you kill her, you get a unique miracle. And yeah, I look at her now, yeah, she's the cleric lady. I don't know why she's attacking me, though, and yet helps me. Again, it's very interesting. It all lends to my theory that you're basically the bad guy here, and she's the cleric that may help you on the outset, but she's trying to do her divine duty for the church and get rid of you. So see you back in Majula, lady. And I'm going to pause here, and we'll pick it up next time. So thanks for watching. Please leave a comment below. Again, like if you haven't already. I love following you guys' comments, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.